In this episode of IT SPARCcast, Deep Fusion yells, "Fire in the hole!" Ubiquiti gets in the zone, and we're going to follow Dell's lead and rename this podcast to IT SPARCcast Pro Max Slim Premium Plus.
That's far less complicated.
Welcome to IT SPARCcast. I'm your host, John Barker.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt.
It's Friday, January 10th.
And it's CES week. Has AI changed your life yet?
Oh, it's going to take over.
Betting on it. Well, I know.
IT SPARCcast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now...
we're here for you.
We are. And now, the news bites.
Are we feeling all together?
Well, are we feeling all together? So we got a lot of news out of CES, and a lot of people think CES, because it's called the Consumer Electronics Show, is really just about consumer electronics. And what we have found is that there's a lot of enterprise announcements that also come out of CES. So we're going to talk about some of the enterprise IT announcements, and starting with Unifi. And then we're going to talk about at the end whether Unifi does qualify as an enterprise IT announcement. And I think some of you might be surprised by our findings on that. But at CES, Ubiquiti announced Unifi Network 9.0. This introduces several new features aimed at enhancing scalability and security for their network deployments. And according to their announcement, these enhancements in Unifi Network 9.0 are designed to streamline network management, bolster security, and support large-scale deployments, reflecting Ubiquiti's commitment to providing scalable and efficient network solutions. Again, that was quote.
Okay, that sounded like a mouthful.
That was a mouthful. There were a number of new features, all of them very exciting. One of the ones I think is the most exciting is this new zone-based firewall that's really going to help simplify network traffic management and really provide another layer of security that they have been behind. I think that the one area on networking that Ubiquiti might have been behind some of the bigger players was on their firewall and segmenting off the traffic. They've been able to do VLANs and things like that for a while, but this is another level for them and something I'm excited to start using myself.
I've got to agree with you. One of the first things that I noticed. So folks, why are we talking about Ubiquiti? Because if you're in IT or you're like us, you're supporting 5 other people.
Right.
Plus, you want systems in your house that do things sort of enterprise-like, but maybe not that expensive. Zone-based firewalls are not new. And if you go into a firewall on a previous Ubiquiti, you're like, okay, it looks sort of like a Linux IP tables. If you even see that, right? That's the challenge. By going to zone-based, they're doing stuff which all the cool kids are doing in security for firewalls now. And I think that's a big deal. Also, you should talk about the cyber secure stuff.
Absolutely. So as a note, both Lou and I actually run Ubiquiti as our main network hub and our firewall here at our houses. I've been using it for about 4 years. I've been super happy with it. But they also announced the Unifi Cyber Secure. Now, this is a partnership that they're doing with Proofpoint, and they have 2 subscription models here. I'm going to talk about the subscription in a second. But the first one is for $99 a year, they provide Cyber Secure, which covers 55,000 threat signatures, and they feel is suitable for a mid-sized deployment. And again, $99 a year is not much. I might go ahead and chip in on that and see how that works here at my home base. But they also offer Cyber Secure Enterprise, which offers 95,000 signatures and is, again, designed for those larger scale deployments, and that's $500 a year. Now, let's step back and talk about subscriptions, because one of the things that about Unifi is that they had made a commitment of a subscriptionless cloud management system, and that's unique in the industry. And having used the Unifi interface for the last 4 years, I feel that it is the most intuitive and complete web interface, cloud-based web interface of any of the vendors out there. I've looked at them all. I've used quite a few of them on a regular basis. And I don't think you can beat the Unifi system from ease of use and completeness of package. but it's not. There is no subscription, and that's not the particular reason I chose it. But it's a nice add-on that I don't have to pay an annual fee. This is a third party coming in, and so what you're not paying. It's possible that Ubiquiti is getting a cut of this, but at the end of the day, what you're paying for is the Proofpoint signatures, and they're going to charge Ubiquiti for those signatures. They could go with a free model, but that's not going to be as good. Or they could come up with their own, and then they would incur a cost that would have to continue to be updated. Then maybe they would have to put in a subscription model. So I think this is a fair compromise to allow for a more robust security solution with these Proofpoint signatures and keep the main management platform still subscription free.
I've got to agree. The thing is, John's saying, he's like, I've been using it for 4 years. I jumped on longer ago than that and had a really intermediate experience with it. My experience with Ubiquiti, if you had used it like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, maybe you were attracted to them because they've got these fantastic point-to-point radio links. If you're trying to get network extended out somewhere, they are just unbeatable in their price, and they work really well. But their experience, I found, is the network was great until it wasn't, and once it got not great, you had to wipe the whole thing out and start over. If you were lucky, it would come back. Then he had a great experience with it. I moved back to it, and I'm really, really impressed with the base level cloud offering. It's great. You can do everything you pretty much need to do in that cloud.
The next thing that they announced, Ubiquiti announced SiteMagic SD-WAN. So they now provide SD-WAN capabilities. They can do a hub and spoke technology supporting up to 1,000 locations. So 1,000 locations is a lot of locations, and that's ideal for those spread out networks where you have lots of different locations. Maybe you're a retail, or maybe you are a company that owns those minute clinics or urgent care facilities, things like that. This would be great for those locations that have lots and lots of sites. And that, again, I think is really encouraging. And by the way, is included in the cost of the hardware, no additional subscription on top of it.
Now I have a question about this. I went and looked at this. They're calling it SiteMagic SD-WAN. This looks like VPN to me. What makes this SD-WAN? Can I have multiple links? Can I prioritize between the links? I don't know this. John, do you have any insight here?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think that what Lou and I should do is, since we actually have this gear, is we could actually do a test and we could let you know how it works and what it actually does. So here's a question for you. Are you interested in that? Are you interested in Unifi as a platform for the enterprise or for a school or for smaller deployments? If you're interested, let us know. Send an email at feedback@itsparkcast.com or hit us up on X @itsparkcast. Let us know what you think about Unifi. Have you had bad experiences? We know that there was a security breach about 4 or 5 years ago. It turned out to be an employee that was disgruntled. There was all kinds of other things like that. What is your feeling on Unifi and whether it's enterprise grade?
I will turn up my Starlink. I'm on fiber. I've got Starlink, but Starlink is not active right now. I'll turn it up. We can do path testing with this stuff, but I'm not going to spend that money unless you guys care.
Right,
so
absolutely.
We can do that.
I could set up a cellular backup and then run that as well and see how that works.
We had some questions about the API. Can you tell me, did they make some changes?
They did. So they actually introduced the Unified Network API, and I believe that's how they're working with the Proofpoint and some of the other things that they're doing. But what this is going to do is provide a deeper direct access to the unified deployment without having to route traffic through the cloud. So this is done by what they call the Dream Machine, which is their core management hub. It's a hardware device, and it comes in different form factors from something not much bigger than a pack of cards up to a full rack mount solution. But with this API, you can integrate with third parties. And what I'm interested to see is that whether I can integrate with it with my own scripting and have it trigger different pieces. Maybe I can automate onboarding or other things I might want to do around the house. I've been looking to have easier access to the API. There was always like a skunkworks way of doing it, but it wasn't officially supported. This looks like it could be really fun.
On this podcast, you just said scripting and not AI. Shame on you.
That's right. Well, I'm sure I'll use AI.
Bad John.
Scripting. That's it. But again, do you feel that Unifi is ready for full-scale enterprise deployment? We want to hear from you.
Yeah, love your opinion. So speaking of things that are ready for enterprise or maybe not for enterprise, Microsoft says 2025 is the year of Windows 11. I thought it was the year of the Linux desktop, but every year is the year of the Linux desktop. Microsoft is really pushing this year to get everybody to move to Windows 11 because it has AI, which will potentially maybe help you with some of the problems that maybe Microsoft introduced in your life. I don't know, right? But let's take a quick look at it. They really want to push this. They want to get people on 11. Why? Windows 10 is going out of support a couple of months. But before we debate all of this, let's take a real quick look. I pulled these stats up. So right now, of all Windows deployments, Windows 10 is 75%. 75. 3/4 of everybody running Windows out there, which is not me, unless it's in a virtual machine. It's, oh my God, right? Windows 11, 10%. Windows 7, 5%. You guys remember Windows 8 and 8.1? Well, 2% still out there running it. In older versions, slightly less than 1%, which is a huge problem because if you have embedded applications, you got test equipment in a lab somewhere that's running off Windows, you're not touching it, right? It works. So everybody's saying this is supposed to be the AI thing. And as we know, we all trust Microsoft's recall. It's not creeping us out or anything. And another fun fact that we'll get into. John, you want to say something, so you got to jump in on this.
Yeah, so I think there's two interesting factors here. One is why the big push for Windows 11, and obviously every company wants you on the newest operating system, and there's lots of reasons for that. But the real reason is that Windows 11 is the cornerstone of Microsoft's subscription service. And everything runs off of that. So you can get subscription service for OneDrive and for Office 365 and AI as they start maybe including more advanced features in AI. And then it's also the cornerstone of their data monetization strategy, so that as you use the AI and as you use these tools in a similar way that Google monetizes your search, Microsoft is monetizing the usage of your operating system. So that's why they really want to get you onto Windows 11. I mentioned last week that I've got a Windows 11 system sitting in the other room that it's not even licensed, and Microsoft doesn't care because it's got full functionality.
They want to sell you the subscriptions, don't they?
They want, and I do have Microsoft 365 subscription that I use in a few different places. So that's what they
we
really care
have
about.
one of those, yeah. But here's the thing, right? As we get a little further down, when I talk more about what happened at CES, NVidia had an announcement about making Windows really rock for AI, and their solution is run the Windows Linux layer. So what's this going to look like? Maybe 2025 really is the year of Linux on the desktop. It's just going to come with a Microsoft branding on top of it.
Who knows? There you go. The other really interesting thing out of the stats that you pulled up, Lou, was that Windows 7 still represents 5% of the market. 5% is a lot as far as a number of deployments. I got to wonder how much of that goes back again to last week's episode where we talked about government inefficiency and if that is actually a lot of government systems.
It could be. One of the things I've noticed is I remember when Windows 7 was the hot thing, if you really got it dialed in, it was clean. So when they came out with 8, everybody got grumpy. And 10, the big push was 7 to 10. 8 was like a road bump, and you could see it, in our stats, 2%, right? If you had dialed in 7 really well, it was quite good operating system.
Yeah, Windows 7 was the last Windows operating system I used on a regular basis. I moved to Mac around that time, and it was a far superior upgrade than Vista, and really, locked in. Vista had a lot of compatibility issues and with third parties and things like that. Windows 7 really did dial that in. You're right.
Yeah, 7 was pretty clean. And it looks to me like what happened is people said, oh, all right, I'll go from 7 to 10. And then Windows 11 came out. And from what I've seen, it's not that big an upgrade functionality-wise, but they added some things that really irritated people. And now, well, we're going to make you move to it. Okay, good luck with that. You should return to Office, though. Yes, you should.
Yeah, so we talk about return to Office, and we talk about Amazon's return to Office quite a bit. And here's another case where I was on LinkedIn, and speaking of Microsoft and monetizing your data, LinkedIn knows that I talk about return to Office quite a bit and work from home and all of that. So it actually provided a whole string of articles and user comments on the return to Office debate, and that this week was the first full week that Amazon had returned to Office full-time for all employees. And so there were two articles, one from Financial Times and one from Business Insider. And then there were a number of posts that were really interesting, and I'll kind of go through some of those as well. And again, I will provide a link to the whole LinkedIn chain that has all the articles and the comments all in one. That's nice that they allow you to do that. And then you can go through and read through some of those yourself. But the Financial Times made an article on the fact that the RTO begins, but they are seeing resistance. There are people that are not willing to do this or not happy about doing this. And so this goes back to that whole, is this a quiet firing? Is this a way to reduce workforce without having to show on paper that you did a layoff? And I think that that's a good potential. And then there was a more in-depth article from Business Insider where they're saying that RTO is generally a bad idea. Some groups will benefit from it, but that this is really, as I was saying, a backdoor layoff, or I've been calling it quiet firing, and that is probably the real reason behind it. That being said, AWS's CEO, so this is not Andy Jassy, it's the CEO of AWS, says that he's spoken with his staff and they are all excited about RTO. Now, this is from a transcript that was leaked that Business Insider got their hands on. You know what? If you're worried about your job and your boss asks you, are you really excited about this thing that I'm implementing and forcing you to do? Yeah, boss, I love that. It's a great idea. What am I going to say? No, you're an idiot. Why are you doing this to me? No, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to agree with you because you're the guy that controls my paycheck and whether I get it or not.
And realistically speaking, we were talking about this before this episode. These guys are going to get a realignment.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see now that it's kicked in full time, what's actually going to happen. And I am convinced that a 5-day mandatory return to office order is the wrong move for almost every company that has focused on information workers. Obviously, if you're in the warehouse and you have to ship packages, or you're on an assembly line and you're building things, or other tasks like that, then yeah, you've got to be at the location. But if you're building PowerPoints and you're just having meetings, those meetings are probably going to be remote anyway because you've got so many offices that the people you're working with may or may not be in your office, even if they are in a office. So I think that's going to be really telling to see how that turns out.
And honestly, the same people that are telling you to come back to the office are the same people who are going to try to call you up at 8 o'clock in the evening on a Saturday to get you to look at a link or classify a PowerPoint, or they're going to outsource your job to another time zone. So the logic doesn't really hold up very well.
Yeah, there's a lot of different reasons why work from home is advantageous to everybody. But Lou and I were talking during the prep part pre-show was, look, if I have to leave the house at 6:30 in the morning and then work my regular schedule and then get home at 7 p.m. because of a long commute and miss all that time with my family and whatever else I might have been able to get squeezed in there, I'm going to be much less likely to either answer that email on the weekend or at least be happy about it. Now, on the other hand, if I'm working from home, I have flexible hours, I can take some time off in the middle of the day to take care of things that I need to take care of, or if I've got a sick kid at home and I want to go check on them every once in a while, or some other level of flexibility, answering an email on Saturday is a lot less painful. Matter of fact, I might be happy about it because I've got that flexibility, and that just counts towards my regular work schedule. And I think that that's a big factor here.
I think most people want to do a good job. I mean, there's people who are going to come in and get a job and it's just a paycheck. I've noticed a lot of folks who are in that sort of mindset tend to go for the hourly jobs, right? So part of what we've seen, you know, we'd like to do meaningful work. We all want to do meaningful work. We do this thing. We do it because we find meaning in it. And you watch us because you find us amusing. Or maybe there's some meaning, whatever it is. Or maybe we tell you about magic rocks or XPS.
Well, speaking of magic rocks and meaning, what's the meaning behind deep fission?
Well, it's more magic rocks because this is the year 2025 and people are all freaked out whenever you say nuclear. So from now on, we're calling them magic rocks that get warm when they get near each other. However, anybody who's been tracking the fun part about what's going on with the AI and data center realizes that maybe we need more power. And folks that run data centers need power 24/7. Those loads, even though the loads themselves tend to follow the sun, because we distribute these workloads around the globe, wherever the power is least expensive, the workloads tend to stay relatively constant. That means if you want to do a data center based on solar or wind, you got a bit of a problem. You need power that's always, always there. So either you got to get a ton of batteries or you need a power plant like nuclear. I'm sorry, magic rocks. Don't be afraid, eat that banana. They're all radioactive. What's cool about this? Nuclear startup called Deep Fission wants to bury microreactors to power data centers. Now, when you first think of it, you're like, what in the hell are you talking about? You're going to dig like a little hole and put it down there? No, allow me to correct you. 1 mile deep. 1 mile. They're going to drill a hole 30 inches wide. And then a mile down, they're going to put this reactor full of magic rocks that produces a lot of heat. And then they're going to take that heat, turn it into steam. And that steam goes up to your steam generators that are above. And you're going to get power out of this thing. You think this is kind of silly, yeah? You're digging a mile deep hole, but the technology they're using is really well proven. It's called pressurized water reactors. Most reactors out there are pressurized water reactors. And the hard part about building these reactors is to build an enclosure for it that can handle the pressure. But if you stick it down a mile, pressure is already there. Right? So it's all pressurized. You stick this thing down. Company says they can get these things out of the hole in about an hour. If something goes wrong, the magic rock part is a mile away from you under the ground, deeper than most nuclear test shots. It's a pretty slick setup. We know that they're formally going to go with this. They're targeting 5 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, which is pretty good. About 15 megawatts electrical. And they're working on starting to get that through our lovely bureaucracy to get it built. We'll have to see how the new administration changes how those procedures work. You got any thoughts on this thing, John?
I think that, we talked about this a number of times. We talked about how Microsoft is getting involved with the new 3 Mile Island project. We've talked about data centers having their own reactors on site. And this just seems like a great innovation towards that, because when you're talking about, as you said, you need sustainable power. You need to not be reliant on the grid, because the grid is less and less reliable, especially as you're drawing the needs that we have with these AI data centers. And you can't rely on solar and wind on a consistent basis. This seems to be a great piece. And I feel that Deep Fission is somebody to watch, because this seems a really smart way to do it, as opposed to putting the reactor either next to the data center or a mile away from the data center above ground. To be able to bury it just seems like a lot of extra safety factors.
Oh, and I have to give a further disclaimer here. I used to be a DOE certified radiation worker. So I've dealt with radioactive stuff. Whether it's induced or whether we introduced it into the machine as a specific target. This is freaking gold standard level shielding. This is really good. In fact, I would foresee, John, the only challenge that you're going to see is usually you're punching through somebody's aquifer. So the big question is always going to be, how are you casing this well, right?
Absolutely.
How tight is that casing? But a mile down, you're not pulling water from 5,000 feet down. Nobody can afford that.
Right.
So it's interesting. But you
do need to worry about the environmental impact, and hopefully they are looking at that, because
you don't
want to be
most people
irradiating the water table.
Yeah, you absolutely. But the point is, most people have no idea. People will gripe about radiation, eat a banana, and eat a potato, and those are both full of potassium isotopes. Right? You take way more radiation from that than you ever will from these silly things. Yeah, people just don't get it. But you know what? Who else doesn't get it?
In case you missed it, at CES, Dell is getting rid of the XPS line of computers. They're getting rid of the Precision line of computers. They're getting rid of the Latitude line of computers. And they're getting rid of the Inspiron brand. So they are no longer making anything, except they are. And they're all part of a new branding strategy that Dell seems to have gotten from our favorite fruit company. So now, instead, Dell has the Dell Pro and the Dell Pro Max lines. And within each of those lines, you have a Plus, a Pro, and a Premium. So that just seems like an interesting move. And whether that simplifies or not is to be seen. And the other interesting thing is that at CES, we saw a number of other companies also releasing product lines that were Pro and Pro Max. So it seems like they're just latching on to what Apple's been doing. It'd be really funny if next year Apple completely changes it up, though.
I think Apple should release XPSs. Right.
They could do that.
And one thing you missed is that this is going to be the best part of all, right? There is a straight up Dell brand. So for us poors that don't want to spend the money on the Pro or whatever, you can just get the baseline Dell. Now, I looked at this, and inside each one, you'll have the base, the Plus, and the Premium. So you can get a Dell Pro Max Plus Premium, whatever. I think there should be like hood ornaments on these things and something on the tailgate to tell people how cool you are. Maybe special colors. I don't know.
Well, I'm waiting for the commercial where the guy says, "Dude, you're getting a Dell Pro Max Premium."
But yeah, it's one thing that came out of CES. What else came out of CES? You want something else to talk about?
How about GPU architecture?
I think we should, because it's bigger than just GPUs, right? We saw a lot of announcements this week. I'd say probably one of the biggest ones was NVIDIA's. And why it's such a big deal is less about everything they announced around the graphics card as it was everything they announced before it and some of the things you may have missed. So let me go over it real quick. So they announced their new architecture, which is called Blackwell, which is John and I were talking about before this. Like, what is this, Intel? Right? I mean, they had Ampere and all these other guys. Who is Blackwell? But the point is that this is sort of a culmination of a whole bunch of other things that's been going on. So about 3 weeks ago, they announced new embedded chips called Jetson Orins. They had the Orin Nano. You could get a kit, a small dev kit for $275 that runs this technology, that runs an embeddable module that's 75 trillion operations per second, which is pretty quick. And you could develop and then take that module and design it into something else and roll your code out. Now they came out with a new graphics card. Graphics card's cool. It's fast, right? The GTX 4090, which was the standard bearer, which is $1,600, $2,000 on eBay if you're going to buy one. They're really popular for people who are running local models for AI training, as well as the gaming crowd, right? So just, John was pointing out, NVIDIA really started to jack, right? It was during the pandemic. They were chartering planes to fly NVIDIA chips to do crypto for Bitcoin. And it's like, okay, so NVIDIA's been playing around for this for a while. They came up with this CUDA architecture that allows you to disintermediate the graphics chip, make it into a vector processor. Most of your supercomputers have been going this way for 10 years. So now we see this other application, the GTX 500 or the 50 series. So if you're going to buy the equivalent performance of, for those low hoity-toity people who had the 4090s last month, you're going to pay for a 5070 Ti or a 5070 for 500 or 750 bucks, half the price. More performance.
Why don't you run through the number of transistors and maybe give us a comparison to other key technologies?
This is a little bit mind-blowing as we see in the path. The Blackwell architecture comes in at 92 billion with a B transistors. Let me put this on a page for you, especially if you're an older geek like I am. The Cray 1 computer had 3,500 transistors. The Intel 8088, which kind of kicked off this whole business computing revolution, 29,000. And if you were cool like Don and I were, because we were on Motorola 68,000 processors, well, we were rocking 68,000 transistors. And if you're on an Apple M4, I have an M4 Max because, it's cool, right? 28 billion transistors, which is a lot. 92. This thing is a flipping powerhouse. And you would think, hey, cool, great. Much better gaming, all this stuff. But at the same time, they announced something else. And I think this is the most important part. They announced a new infrastructure to allow accurate physical simulations of real-world environments. Because where do you really, really need, what is the next step in AI? Where do you really, really need this intelligence? You need it on a factory floor. You need it on a robot that's stocking your warehouses. And I know Amazon and other companies are messing around with this quite a bit. So you take the Orin chip, which is the last generation, by the way. That's all Ampere-based stuff. It's all hardened Ampere. Blackwell is the new stuff. So next year they're going to be back here with Blackwell-based processors for embedding into robots. And then you add this software architecture. Not only is NVIDIA working on this, but Google is working on something very similar. Simulating the 3D reality. So you can say, oh, I want a robot that's going to go outside, or the robot is a car. What is my code going to do if it's snowing? What is it going to do if the sun is shining right into the sensors? This is edge AI. Yeah. And how is that going to impact us and what we do? We're the ones who are going to have to get connectivity out to it, first of all. Second of all, everybody's talking about pushing everything into the cloud. If you're sampling data traffic and trying to do analysis, those are your senses, right? Moving that traffic into the cloud is a problem. What if you put the intelligence right there? What if I put the intelligence in the AP? What if I put the intelligence in the switch? What if I put it in the router? What if it's on your remote site? What if the next generation of the Ubiquiti stuff we're running has that built in? What are we going to learn?
Yeah.
So
I think this is a great story just in general about NVIDIA and their growth from, I was a gamer back in the day and I had my first 3DFX card. So there's one of the first graphic accelerators for 3D games. And then, others came into play and NVIDIA really just took over that and became really NVIDIA and AMD, and NVIDIA took the lead there. And then they pivoted when they started realizing that people were using it for crypto mining, and then pivoted into AI, and are now one of the top 5 most valuable companies on the planet. And they're in the leagues with Apple and Microsoft and all these others, and have left other chip manufacturers way behind in the dust. And I just think that's a great story, and it's a great way to show that a company of that size can pivot and can grow and be innovative in ways that a lot of larger companies are blamed for not being able to do.
Oh, and it wasn't enough that they're going to rub our face into how awesome they are at CES, because they are, right? They announced a $3,000 supercomputer called Project Digits. That's about that big. You can put it on the desk next to you. It has the throughput. It's got a processor, 20 ARM cores, a petaflop of computing power. I mean, seriously. $3,000.
There's a gentleman that I've been following on X who was building a small cluster. I started with 4 and then eventually 5 Apple Mac Minis with the largest M4 Pro processor you could get in those, and was setting those up as an AI cluster. I saw a post just yesterday, or Wednesday, I guess, where he said, I'm giving up on that because NVIDIA has just blown this out of water. This is now a dinosaur, and I want to move on to the faster, more robust stuff, which perfectly makes sense. That's kind of the way it goes in technology. You leapfrog each other, but the fact that the M4 hotness was being touted as this amazing leap forward, and now it's been leapfrogged by NVIDIA and these other devices. It's just amazing. It's exciting times.
I think it's really exciting. What I'm really interested in, and we were talking about, is that maybe the M4 isn't old news, because eventually what you're going to do is it's going to pre-process the data. You're going to have one of these little things that looks about the size of your dock. Say you're running a Thunderbolt dock. That's your AI supercomputer. You're going to shove the workload into that. It's going to churn it out, kick it back out to the display layer, which is your laptop. Boom, you just developed a new application. This is going to be huge.
Yeah, so along with the return to office and work from home, AI is something that we're going to keep a close tab on, and NVIDIA is really at the front of that. But that's going to cover this week's episode. We couldn't do podcasts without listeners like you, and we want to know what you think. Do you have any thoughts on any of the topics we talked about today? Is Unifi ready for the enterprise? Would you consider rolling it out to your enterprise? What do you think about the newest announcements from NVIDIA and Microsoft and Dell changing their names and things like that? Please let us know. Is there anything else you want us to cover? Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback@itsparkcast.com, or hit us up on X at @itsparkcast. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications. That's really going to help us grow. If you feel you're getting value out of us, please tell your friends and colleagues so that they can get that same value as well. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.